Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. So this is again another lecture in our series, Conversations with the Past, and I'm very grateful to have you all here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Becca Tamel, and I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator here at the Chapman. So our speaker tonight is Richard Timberlake. Richard is a photographer, author, and curator. He was one of the editors of J.S. Wooley, Adirondack Photographer. He is the owner and operator of Timberlake Studios in Saratoga Springs. And he has helped curate exhibits at the Hyde Collection and here at the Chapman. And it includes our current exhibit, which is on display, Perfect Gems, Adirondack Landscapes, Seneca Stoddard, and Sumner Wooley. Yeah. So now I'm going to turn it over to your talk, Perfect Gems, the work of Seneca Stoddard and Sumner Wooley.
Well, thank you very much, Rebecca. And first of all, thank you guys for coming out tonight on a kind of, I don't know if it's snowy or rainy or both. Can't make up his mind. But yeah, first I want to say thank you to everyone at the Chapman. Nicole, Rebecca, Maureen, everybody's been just really great to work with the past year. We started on this journey kind of last spring when I got a call from Nicole to talk about doing the exhibition and how to juxtapose the two photographers and will it work and can it work and what's the depth of this. And so after a few meetings last spring, we decided, yeah, I think we can make this work. And so we started sounding off each other and trying to figure out what it is we want to show and how we put these two together, because they do fit together. And have you guys all been through the exhibition and see it? Yeah, good. So you know what I'm talking about. So we had a talk then at the Queensberry Hotel. I don't know who all was here for that in September, just before it opened. Yeah. So this is kind of a review of that and in a little different way. So let me ask you, are there any photographers in the crowd tonight? Oh, okay. Anybody who really shoots with a camera anymore? And not this? Yeah, good. That's good to hear. I know. Yeah, exactly. This is, and if you guys want to look at the proofs, these are some of the proofs. We had about 1,200 negatives, Wooley negatives. A friend of mine kind of didn't know what to do with. And so he brought them to me and said, here, whatever you want to do. And that was kind of the start of this side of this show, Wooley side. And so the first thing I did, it took a couple of years to prove the catalog. And I said, if you want to look at these, you're welcome to. And we tried to figure out where they were shot, how they were shot, with what camera, and what time period. And that was a good couple of years of just trying to figure everything out. But let me see where I'm at here. Did anybody sign up for the photography class? Oh, okay. So you're bringing your cameras, right, and cell phones and all that. Okay, so this will be fun because we're going to, I think, start a series, hopefully, if it gets a good response on, just basics of using your camera and also, film and digital and cell phones, and how to use the other side, which is your computer, and how to save and store images, digital images. So where's my clicker? Here it is. I'm not sure how to use this. No, it's my business card. So anyway, the term or the title we came up with is Perfect Gems of Photography. It really came from a chronicle from the 1876 chronicle. And there was a critic who was looking, to America to try to find a prolific photographer. And he wrote in his journal, about Seneca Stoddard. He thought he was kind of the chosen one that would pick up that torch, because there's so much going on in Europe at this time, of development with Lumiere brothers in Lyon, France, and moving pictures and projection of pictures. And so people were looking to America, and really they spotted Seneca Stoddard. Now, there's not much I can say about Seneca Stoddard, because I'm sure half this or more knows more than what I do, because he's so well published. And So anyway, we put the two together because basically they were born in the same town of Wilton, New York. And, it was such a rural town, back then. There was no school for this. There were no colleges. Nobody went to art school. Nobody, this was just under their own steam of figuring things out, and getting off the farm and saying, okay, what are you going to do with your life? And they both gravitated towards art. And Stoddard was a true artist. He painted, you can see his paintings out here in the exhibition, which are really special. And I think he painted train cars, I think, is that right, early on? And then he became a sign painter. Well, they had similar experiences, only more on the photography side in the darkroom, printing. And but the one thing they had in common was that artistic eye. I mean, it was in their blood. You could see it, and they expressed it in different ways. But of course, Stoddard was a generation away from him. He was 20 years older. So he somewhat mentored Wooley. So here, Wilton, now, kind of a suburb of Saratoga, actually. But back then it was farm country. Both their families came off of farms. We can only assume that they knew each other because it was so small. And so they started to work together and travel together mostly in 1893. And 1893 is important because they both went into the Adirondacks and started shooting before it was the Adirondacks. And they traveled together to Chicago World's Fair, Columbia World's Fair, which is really known for some crazy stuff. They showed zippers and Cracker Jacks and lights and a lot of stuff. But they went together. And it's well documented that they did quite a few things together. And shooting together, you can't tell half the time whose photos or whose. But this is something that I showed this picture before, and I'll ask this question: is this is conversations with the past that we're going to bring forward to now and look ahead 120 years. And it's really about the story between what you see here and this, and how we got to this. And how today we can look at these and find these beautiful negatives and prints and go out and really enjoy how these guys shot and what they saw. And in 130 years from now, 21, whatever, 50 or 40, how will people look back on our images and our pictures and see us? And my question is, how do you archive what we shoot today? How do you save it so for future generations? We rushed into the digital age, and here we are. But is that good? I don't know if there's a right answer to it. And I have people that come up all the time, and I have friends in the camera shops in New Jersey where I came out of, and everybody rush in and say, "Oh, you got to digitize my slides and my negatives." And, "Oh, I don't want to lose them." I would be like, "Well, just put these away in a cool, dry place. They're going to outlast, I think, any digital files." And then for a while, it's popular to put everything on CDs and DVDs. They're just glued together with foil. I mean, what are the odds? And so, when this film was developed properly and fixed properly, and the silver as you knew, 120 years later, when I started proofing these, they were stunning. They were gorgeous prints. I was like stunned that it came out so well, but they maintained the contrast and they just didn't fade. They were just good negatives. And the same thing with like Kodachrome. It would last forever too if you keep it dry and cool in a dark place. But that's kind of my quest for the answer of how do we do this for ourselves. And a lot of people say, well, do this. Scan them and make prints, save the prints. I don't think there's any proof right now today that the inkjets and they're archivable inks, they say, on a good stock paper, how long these will last. And really, nobody, I think, knows yet. It's been around for about 20 years, but will it last another 100 years? I don't know that. But I don't think there's going to be any USB ports on computers that you'll be able to plug in and, oh, look at my great, or on my phone. Those digital files, eventually, I've had the problem with them getting corrupted over time. And JPEGs, the more you open and close them, they deteriorate. It's just not a good, safe way of archiving any of your photos. So I still have, my albums, travel books. I don't put them in, I still hang on to those. Not sure what else. But anyway, I love this picture because it kind of depicts what we're talking about. Everybody's fascinated with images, photography, and they were back in the 1900s. They still are today. But there's a big difference and a big difference on how to archive, save prints. So anyway, to back up in context, back around the late 1800s when our Stoddard and Wooley was roaming around shooting pictures, from 10,000 feet, this country was going through a huge change. We kind of relate to that today with creating wealth. And there was an immigration of 1 million people. Around 1907, there were 1 million immigrants that came through Ellis Island. So, today is when I start reading about this, I can almost feel similar with this big wealth being created among a few and the immigration problem. They're naming the same things as we're kind of going through now. It's kind of similar. But so there were guys, when they started laying the rails, you could see through Boston, New York, and now it came up here. This was new to American middle class to go on vacation. They hadn't done that yet. And so as things started rolling after the Civil War, jobs were created, and there's so much wealth created, people had time. They had the summer off that they could have a few bucks and they could get on a train from Glens Falls, come up to Lake George and get on a steamboat and go to a hotel, and enjoy themselves. And this was vacation was a new thing back then. And so, this is mostly how they traveled. And this is famous, everybody knows this Stoddard map up to Lake George. And this is where a lot of Boston's Fall, Saratoga, Glens Falls, all the way up is how, this area was developed. And that's how these guys really cashed in on one thing, and that was postcard photography. And postcards were the thing because nobody had a camera. And when they would come up here, they wanted to take something home. And one of the things that I brought in are a few books, if you want to look at them. Our good friend Robert Bowen and this postcard photographers in this area. And it's an excellent book through Syracuse University Press. And he has a chapter on Wooley, but he talks about Beach and all the other ones that around. So every town, every small town had like a village photographer that was selling postcards. I mean, that was a big industry. They're still out there on eBay, and people collect them. We have a few out here. And there were certain cameras that did postcards better than others, and we'll kind of get into that later on. But anyway, at that time, here are the three big players. There were quite a few actually, but these were a few that were around when they were around. And these were the big wealthy players. Carnegie still, and Henry Ford didn't really invent the car, but he mass produced it. And of course, J.P. Morgan financed the federal government, I think. And these two guys really changed the way we shoot and the way we did photography for years. And more than ever, Wooley and Stoddard would have felt the effects of what they were doing, because as they developed all this new technology, it changed the way they shot, what they did, and how their businesses were run. They started out in postcard, and they went from there. But as these two guys developed new pictures, it was just a big time. It almost reminds me of the 90s and 2000s when digital and all these things were changing so rapidly. And everybody's trying to get their head around digital photography. Everything was digital. Everything was HD. And same in this era, where there was so much going on, so many new things happening at once. And Stoddard and Wooley both jumped on the bandwagon. Whatever came out of Rochester, they latched on to ran with. George Eastman. I mean, he changed the world of photography. It's a shame to see what happened because of that, but he was like Henry Ford, he mass produced. It was around 1901 is when the Browning came out and changed everything and kind of killed the postcard business. So we'll start out with Stoddard. When we go into the exhibition, of course, on the left-hand side, you see both of them there. And you see the one with the knapsack, and he's 20 years Wooley senior. So he was already out shooting quite a bit before, Wooley started following around and tagging along with him. And he was pretty well established. And this guy, and both of them, but this guy must have been a workaholic. He produces so much in so many different ways. I mean, this guy probably rarely sleeps. If you've ever been to Thomas Edison's home and lab in East Orange, New Jersey, the same way. He had his bed in his library. That's all he did was work. He would sleep, get up, work some more. And I think that's the way he was. And Wooley was too, because they created so much art and so much imagery. I mean, it's hard to believe. Even with our technology, it'd be hard to do, but they did it twice as hard, took twice as long. But they must have been out every day shooting. But at the time, photography was a way to record, just record events or record something. They were shooting everything. I mean, because nobody had shot everything before. They were shooting churches and houses and trains and everything. We had stacks of negatives. After a while, your head's spinning going through these. Why are they doing this? Why would you shoot every house on the block? This makes no sense. The stereo views, panoramics, 4x5s. What are you doing? But nobody had recorded this stuff. All they could do is sketch it or paint it. And as soon as they could do this on a mass scale, this is what these guys did. And you think of him as the artist, and the Lehner slideshows, but he was, as core businessman too. These guys picked a profession that really wasn't quite a profession. Maybe wasn't. I don't think they knew where it was going, and it was so new that they were just running with it, and it turned out great for them. Great lifestyles for that time. They traveled the world. They really did. They saw things that the average person would never see. So it afforded them a really nice lifestyle. These are the paintings in the cabinets. I think I see your reflection. Yeah. So when we started setting this up, these weren't really a part of the show. And as we got into it and Nicole brought them up, it was like, oh my God, I've never seen these before. They must have been in the archives for I don't know how long. I mean, they're beautiful. They really show what an artist he was. Where would he find time to do this? But he painted. And this is his map making, of course. And he actually hooked up with the federal government and worked in, when they started really surveying and mapping the Adirondacks, he got in on it. His guidebooks, but I don't know how he had time for all this, but he produced so many guidebooks and just beautiful. And you can tell by the covers, his artistic part, that side of him just can't stop, they're so creative and really nice. And just on everything in the area. So the wet plate photography, that was his thing, and that's pretty much what he did when he started into the side photography. There wasn't much else around. They'd already done daguerreotypes and tintypes, and now they were into a wet plate. And they were getting close to this dry plate area, or Kodak would come up with. But when he was doing this, he was taking everything out, mixing it up, and brushing on and coating glass plates. And it had to have been, if you've shot pictures over the last 20 or 30 years, Kodak, when they were around, they would always supply you with the stat sheets on how to do everything exactly right, what the temperatures of the chemistry, how long, agitate, all these things. They had none of that. They were going out and they'd buy these chemicals, and it was like a grand experiment. And they would mix them up and just cross their fingers. Is this going to work? But they had done it enough times and repetitive that they got it down pretty good. But there was no, encyclopedia or books you couldn't go on Google or whatever, look this stuff up. It just didn't exist. So they were kind of out there on their own experimenting with this. And so this is really fascinating to me to see Stoddard. the picture on the left is crazy. I mean, if you look at this, look at that camera, look at the ragtag dark cloth, and all those boxes are full of glass plates. And all those little bottles with the funnels are all his chemistry. And he's mixing this, and you can see on the right how you have to have a table set up so you can mix everything. Take a brush, coat your plates, and just like one of these cameras, you would have to slide it in, make your exposure, pull it out, and you had to process these things within 10 to 15 minutes, or else they were bad. So it was pretty quick. Once you shot it, you had to take it out. You had to use sodium thiosulfate, and that's stuff I've used. It stinks. In this tight little area outside in the Adirondacks, still was carrying all this stuff in and mixing it, and then fixing the silver, taking the silver out, washing it, and drying. I mean, it's nuts.
What do you think with that picture?
I don't know. I wish I knew. Maybe it's Roller. I don't know. I really don't. It's a stick. That is a stereo view too. That's half of the picture. So whoever shot it with a stereo. I have no idea. And if you over the years, I'm sure everybody knows Ansel Adams in the West Coast, and there was Weston out in California doing similar work. And you see these pictures of Ansel Adams with the donkey and all this stuff loaded on the back on through Yosemite. Similar stuff. I mean, waiting for the right sun to come up at the perfect time. Really? Who would have the patience today for this? I mean, really. But they did. And what's amazing is the photographs that came from these look like paintings. They look like sketches. And part of that is just due to the chemistry makeup of the negatives and how they're printed, which are beautiful. But I mean, look at this. I mean, they're just beautiful images. And here, 120, 30 years later, they're still here and they're still able to enjoy them. I think that's Rogers Rock in fact on this bottom, isn't it? I think. So that must be Harts Bay, or the corner of Harts Bay, or the point there. But I mean, just for what they're working with and the amount they produced and how beautiful these are, it's amazing. And I would almost challenge anybody with our technology, how good we are with digital, full frame sensors, all these things now that are out, to go out and do this and create something as good and have it last 120-some years. So I'm afraid with this rush to technology, we're kind of stumbling over ourselves. So this was a wet plate photographer. You probably know his name. He was Civil War, and believe it or not, he's from Warren County. He was right up the road. And this guy made a big one, big if you've studied his photographs. And he was out in the battlefields, shooting. But, he shot Lincoln. I mean, he didn't actually shoot Lincoln. I think it was John Hawkes. He did shoot it. And so he made a name for himself, which is really when I discovered he was from Warren County. I was like, wait, it's crazy. All these photographers are on this area. But it did lend itself to that artistic sort of, person who was out shooting because it's so gorgeous. And yeah, so he was another wet plate guy that was in the area, and he was national. He was a big name. So as time passes, the wet plates became dry plates, and they learned how to coat onto glass, pre-coat it, box it up, sell it, and that's what Kodak did. And so in comes Wooley, and he's looking pretty dapper there on the left-hand side. He's not out in the woods too much. He's got his suit on. He's in a studio. And you can see him with his, his dark slide in his hand, and the dark cloth. He's got his box of plates. So he looks very modern compared to Stoddard, how Stoddard appeared and how he was out hiking around. Stoddard was a naturalist too. He was a combination of many things, but when you see him, he's out shooting the lean-tos, guys sleeping and hunting and fishing, and he's really loving, I think, the outdoors. Wooley was too, but he was in his car. He was all dressed up. He had a studio. He was more, it looks like a metropolitan sort of guy. He was more modern, and that's him. Susie Arnold on the left is his wife. She was from Boston Spa, the daughter of a dentist there. They all, from what I can read, found in some archives that they all consider the Wooleys marrying up to Susan, because the family was well known. He was a dentist. They had some money, and that's their daughter Miriam. And she was about 1 year old when bicycles were introduced. So we have a couple pictures of them on the bicycle, and there's documentation of him riding around town with his camera on his bicycle. People love the bicycles. And they actually took a trip, and I have a document, and there's pictures of it. They took a trip through the Adirondacks on these bicycles. I mean, it's insane. And there's pictures. I have pictures of it. They were from here, like over to mid-Mass and back on like 4th of July to celebrate. And there's pictures of them. There are suits and ties riding by. So I was like, I can't do that with 18 speed, and he's doing it in a suit and tie with one gear. And there were him and his buddy. They took actually a steamboat ride up Lake Champlain and got off like around Westport or somewhere, and then they just rode in the Adirondacks. Now they didn't have a place to stay. It isn't like they planned this thing out. And there's pictures of them, and they're sleeping. They just knock on farmers. Can we sleep in your barn? And how about this? And it's very cool. But I mean, to do that is just another mark for them. So in the middle, there's Wooley did do Silver Bay. We'll see later. I was hired for Silver. He was the staff photographer of Silver Bay for about 11 years, and it grew and it grew. And you can see he has a staff now, and that's Wooley Incorporated, and that's Susan beside him, and his son is in the second from the right in the back. And that's Carl. And Carl didn't really want to be there, I think. he was not in love with it. And once Wooley passed away, he spent a lot of time in the dark. And I think that these businesses, Stoddard and Wooley, were family run. They had their family in the dark rooms. They would drop off things and they would go back out and shoot. And Carl has been noted as saying, and I talked to a couple older folks who knew Carl, and he complained a lot about the chemistry and didn't like the background, but his father had him in there. And once Wooley passed away, he inherited the business in Boston Spa, and he turned it into an antique store instead of a photography store. So he wasn't really into it. This was his studio, and there was talk that it's well kind of written. We found some articles that Susan and him had an apartment for a long time in Boston Spa and had a big fire. And after the fire burnt their apartment down, they built this. And I don't know, they don't really say specifically about the fire, but if you know anything about photography and film, they used nitrate early on to make the coated film. Use nitrate was highly flammable. If it gets hot and you have a stack of them, they would ignite because of fire. I don't know if that's really the case here, but when I read that, I kind of imagined that. So he decided he was going to build a studio. This is a Cumberland Farms, I think, now today on Milton Avenue in Boston Spa. So this is pretty cool stuff. I mean, and that this was in the 1900s. In 1901, the Brownie came out, and so like we talked about, the postcard industry started to die off because everybody came up with their own camera, and they're shooting their own stuff now. And so he started processing, printing, and selling Kodak cameras, of course. And so he switched his business model around, and he had a retail store, and I have an ad down here. I think you can see down on the easel that he sold art supplies, and he sold Victrolas, records, record players. So he had a whole kind of gig going in his retail store. He did a lot of things. And up on top was where they lived, and then they had a studio with skylights, because electricity and flash photography really wasn't quite around yet. And so there's the brownies. The three. I think you pick one up for like $1 or something with film. And so there's a few of his portraits. And he became a real good portrait photographer. And if you look at it, you can see the style, the fashions, kind of already developing in his eye. And these hand painted backdrops are just really cool stuff. I don't know what this is on the right. I think it's a play or something. I think he's involved with the local theater or something. That's what it looks like an ad. But the one on the left is in home. He did a lot of in home portraiture of families out on the front porch, just everywhere. But he was shooting all the time. Here he is on the left, a senior in his own studio, and that's Susan. So this was the camera, and the camera, Stoddard is out in case out here. You may have seen it in the show, the Alvista, which was a swing lens camera. And meaning that this camera, if you kind of look at the upper, the picture, the Alvista claimed that it had the same peripheral vision, or the same vision as humans. And so the swing lens would actually swing, it would move, and it would give you the perspective of what you would be seeing. And so this is only possible with flexible film. And they came up with a whole series of these. Yeah, you can see there's a baby vista at the bottom and all the way up to the big one. And it was 70mm film. And that's what all of these panoramics were made of. And so basically they would shoot these, and they had no way of projecting, making them that size. You couldn't blow things up there. All you could do is contact. So when you walk through the exhibit, you see the brown frames. Those are all original first prints of Stoddard, which is really cool. Black frames are, we took the negatives of Wooley, high-res scanned them and printed them just like that. We wanted to see, because they were so tack sharp and so good, the negatives, we wanted to see how they would blow up. Because if, like, Wooley walked in the room today and saw that, he'd freak out because he had no way of doing that. The only way they could print is by contact. They'd take the photographic paper, lay it on, put glass over it, and expose it. And that's as good as they got. And you can see the film is a little bit bigger, than that. So all of these that he shot, that we have, would have tape and crop marks where he wanted, what he wanted to show it. And I think most of the writing on the negatives you can see, which is really cool. They name things, and say where they were. And I think most of that handwriting probably came from Susan, because it's really pretty perfect. So anyway, the Alvista was the camera to have for postcards, because it just shot perfectly from the big postcards. Yeah, so the swing lens, there you go. And here's the patent on it. But down here you see it's a geared camera, and you can see where this is the slit. I'm gonna have a pointer or something. This back end of it, moved across, and the film was back here, and it would move across the film, expose it. And so one of the faults of this whole thing, and it wasn't like there was a Canon or a Nikon around at the time to build these things. There were no manufacturers. And so this was like a watchmaker that made this, because you look at the gears and the way it runs, totally mechanical. And so my friend rebuilds these, who worked on the book with us, and we went out and shot with them. And it is really hard to shoot. This is, you're cranking this thing. You don't want to crank it too hard. There's a spring that tightens it up, and then when you hit the shutter, that thing starts to swing across, exposing. And if you look at the panoramics, and when you walk through, you'll see all this unevenness across mostly the sky. And that's just that gear, those gears, and that was not a perfect system. And as that thing is swinging across, it's doing this, it's jittery. It's not a real smooth system. And so that's what you see, these banding marks on the prints are because of that. So you would get about 3 shots per roll of these because they're so big. And there was a little punch on the back that as you shot, you would punch it and then advance it, punch it again. Then when you're in darkening, you'd feel for those punches and then you'd cut it, you know, blindly. So the whole thing was kind of a crapshoot. And oh yeah, that's why when you see this stuff, it's amazing what they did it with. It's crazy. And you see where he is. Now he's carrying this stuff up the side of Black Mountain. This is not, you know.
Not a curve.
It is, you're right. And you can see the distortion, you know, a lot. And what they did is if they shot group shots, they would sit them in a semicircle. And then when they shot it, it would look straight. And the same way at the same time, yeah, there's a Kodak panoramic swing lens out there also that Chapman has or owns that they put out. So Alvista was one and Kodak copied it and made their own version of it. The other big one too, I should have brought it, America by the Yard, and it's a circuit camera. And the Kodak circuit camera was one, instead of the lens swinging, the whole camera was on the tripod. It was geared, and it would just, you know, you see these huge panoramics of military and big groups. That's a circuit camera. That's Kodak's version. And the funny part about those is if you look at them, a lot of times the photographer would get a picture over here and be photographed, and as soon as they start to swim, he would run to the other side and he'd be standing there. And there's one of George Eastman in the middle, and all the Kodak people are standing, photographers on both ends. It's pretty funny. It's a great book, really. So there are a lot of different versions coming out of different things that, you know, they weren't really, you know, camera manufacturers at the time. You know, and then in Germany, that's when I'm sure Leica and those guys started making Zeiss lenses, really nailing this stuff down. So anyway, here's, you know, you've seen this, and this is all Alvista. And it had to have been on a tripod. The small ones you could handheld, but when you look at the negatives, it is true that these things, you know, just the composition is so almost perfect. You had to set up that tripod. The horizons are straight. You know, it isn't like they're off and we're going to crop them and straighten everything out like you do in Photoshop or whatever. I mean, when you look at these negatives, they really took the time to square things this way, this way. And these cameras, when they came around, that's more of a studio. If you use that for architecture, it has a swing lens this way to make up, you know, for the parallax, I think you call it, to straighten the lines. And so that's what those cameras were known for. But the Alvista, I mean, they just really took their time to set these things up. I mean, and it's amazing. They'd usually bracket 2 or 3 the same. And you would see a shot like this, and you would see the next one, the boat's a little closer or something, but they would bang off a couple and they would bracket. One negative would be very dense and one would be normal, you know, one would be a little underexposed. You know, we all do the same thing, and digital cameras today, you can set it up and I'll do it for you.
So would he sell this photography? What was?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was in this size. You know, if you, yeah, this is what he'd sell. And he would mass produce those. I need to find them on eBay today. So yeah, that was postcard photography. And yeah, the book, Exposing the Wilderness, is all postcard guys that lived in the Adirondacks around. And it's a fascinating kind of way to make a living, but there was no other way people could take things home. They didn't have a camera to shoot with. And and you find a lot of the postcards that you buy have addresses, handwriting, and a stamp on them, like they send them back to New York City or wherever they came from, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so yeah, that's that one. But you can see when it was kind of a dilemma when we did this. do we leave the ragged edge? Because I like the ragged edge. I want to see the name. I want to see everything. And you can see some crop marks. I think there's tape at the bottom. There's a little splotch down there. And that's a tape mark where when they made the postcard, that's where he wanted it cropped. So, yeah, we had this argument, oh, how perfect should we make it? Well, I could scan these negatives in Photoshop and clean them all up so they're very perfect. But that's not, there was kind of this back and forth with a couple of folks I worked with on the project, how far do you want to go? And I said, well, we've got to have them, just leave them as they are. We could have cleaned them up a lot more, but I didn't think it's necessary. Yeah, everybody knows where this is, right? So my friend Jamie Young, who wrote a chapter in the book about he's lives in Syracuse, and he rebuilds these out vistas. So we spent a weekend. We went out and found these sites and shot out vistas today, then and now. So we still have them. We haven't done anything with them. So one of these days, I think, bring them up, put them beside, because the trees are different. You can barely see over this road now because those trees are so tall. I wish somebody cut it back a little. And there's, now there's rails there instead of rocks. We climbed up this hill and got up to where this view was. You can see the crop marks on that too. I think that's Hewlett's Landing directly across. It's probably his car there too. This is right in the early days of reconstruction of Fort. We have early pictures where nothing's there, it's just rubble. And here they're starting to rebuild. And yeah, most of those rocks disappeared when they were in rubble. They were turned into the basements of a lot of the homes in Ticonderoga. The older homes have, if you go down the basements, that's where everybody was grabbing and building houses. This is one of my favorite shops, just because the guideposts, way off in the distance, you can see the steam coming off where the train is pulled into the station. They would pull the trains right up to the steamboats. They would have flatbed cars with horse carriages on. Everybody would take the carriages off, get the horses, and go off. But the fascinating part, I don't know if you can see it, way to the left, there is a flying boat. There's an airplane landing. And they had plane rides in the village, right in front of Fort William Henry, parking there. They called them flying boats back. They were referencing these, and they would, and in the exhibition, there is an aerial village over the corner that had to have been a very first early shot of the village aerial. And he had to gone up because it was a 4x5 glass plate. So he had to use similar cameras that he was up hanging out of this airplane shooting the aerials. And it's really cool stuff. But as a postcard, you couldn't see any of this. That's why we wanted to blow it up so we could take a look. We had magnifiers. We were trying to look at every detail to see if it was going to be worth to enlarging. Yeah, these are kind of comparison. One's Stoddard and one's Wooley. Can you tell which one is which? One on the left is Wooley and one on the right Stoddard. You really can't tell. They were shooting side by side. This is a fascinating piece of history because it's not there now. They had all those shops down right on the waterfront. And this is the Fort William Henry. You walk up the stairs to it, and there are gardens and everything. It's all gone. It's very cool to see these old, way back in the back, parallel. You see the steamboats back then. These were all like little shops. But they both shot from the same angle, from the same shot. Yeah, this is Wooley on the left, Stoddard on the right. On the left, I think that's looking down Lake George from Blair's Bay or Anthony's Nose, and you're looking down at Sabbath Day Point and maybe Hewlett's. I don't know. I think that's Black Mountain right in the center. I'm not sure about this one. I'm not sure. What do you think? I don't know where that is. Could be the Twin Mountains. Here's kind of the same thing. It's, just similar. Wooley's on the left and Stoddard's on the right. So I couldn't go away without bringing this guy. This can't, this guy was too much of an influence. And as much as Stoddard and Wooley was out every day grinding it out, making a living with the family, he was different. He didn't do that. He was an artist. And he was the one who really drove home that photography is an art form when it really wasn't yet. And he was the one who was really promoting it. And he was privileged. He came out of Hoboken and had his place. It's the quarters now, I think, right? This is his old house where he lived right on Lake George. And I think, yeah, it's real close. And there's a little plaque there where George O'Keeffe painted. If you haven't seen his stuff, you really should look at it because it's quite amazing. And at a primitive time also, he had a show at the Modern Museum of Art in New York City, and was one of the first photography exhibits there. And it was abstraction. It was really crazy stuff. And when you look at it, you don't know it's like George's clouds. It's top of a mountain of clouds. It's like, well, what's he doing? But this was him making a statement that photography wasn't just to record. And he had, I'm sure he had the studio on Fifth Avenue in New York City, and he brought over painters and Picasso and artists, and that didn't go over very well because they were so far ahead of, everything that, the critics didn't like what he was doing. And they didn't like the studio stuff that he was showing because it was just too far out there. I think Impressionism was still, had everybody in the scripts, and so he was here. I mean, he was, and we really kind of tried to find some writing or something that Stoddard and Wooley or somebody recognized this guy because he was here at the same time. And he was in the same spot right at the road. But they were pretty isolated. They were artists, and their artist buddies would come up on the weekends from New York City, and they were George O'Keeffe was painting, and the story of all that, and he was shooting her and Lake George. So, but they were quite the power couple here. He was so influential in photography. If you ever take classes and study the history of it, you can't avoid talking about. And if you haven't, looked at his stuff, seen it, you should really take the time to kind of scroll through because he wrote and he had so much influence on how people view photography. And like I said, Stoddard and Wooley, they were blue collar. They were working every day. They were shooting every day. They were making a living. They were trying to follow trends and make the best of it. He didn't have to do that. He came up for the summer and just hung out and shot whatever he felt like, an artiste. But he was influential, no doubt. So, one of the things that came along and that was happening in Europe and Lyon, France, was projected images. And here it started catching on here, lantern slides, and there's lantern slides, in the exhibit. And that's just what they were. They had candles and these projectors because they had no electricity. And so it was very primitive that they were trying to get it up on the wall so everybody could see it. So eventually they did. And eventually, as that came around, it was really Stoddard and Wooley too. They shot side by side, and you can't tell half the time whose slide you're looking at. And then, then they packaged it, of course. And this is a Wooley show. He had shows just like Stoddard. They traveled all over the world shooting lantern slides. They would come back, and I went down to the Boston Spot Library and do all the old newspapers. Plenty of ads of a lantern slide show in the church basement, like for a nickel. Wooley had traveled to Canada, Mexico, Europe, somewhere. World's Fair in San Francisco, to the national parks that weren't quite national parks yet. And people just didn't do that, But Stoddard and Wooley did that, and they shoot. And this is how it was their, National Geographic. People would come and see this because they just didn't know what they didn't know because they hadn't been out of town like these guys traveled. And they turned it into a real business. but it was a show, and so they sang. It was entertaining. They would sing. They'd have advertisements. He would do advertising, local businesses. Mrs. Wooley selling Kodak, things. Herself by Wooley. And you can see they're hand painted. There were houses in New York City who just hand painted your lantern slides. You sent them to them and they would paint them for you. They're very good, very professional. You can tell the difference when a Wooley or Stoddard is painting their own. It's pretty sloppy. And the brush strokes are going off, and but these are, these have been sent to a house professionally, colored.
Right.
I think that's North Creek. I think on the left.
Oh, yeah, that's like it.
I think it is. I could be wrong, but I think it is. And this, you think of Teddy Roosevelt National Parks and North Creek and him up here too, and all that went on. And it's pretty incredible. And I always forget this guy's name. He was the big guy. He was the Adirondack guy that everybody used through the Adirondacks. I can't remember his name. Do you know? Yeah, I've seen this picture. That picture. I'm sorry.
Phelps
It may be.
or
Maybe.
Louis or.
It's Phelps.
Yeah,
Phelps sounds right, but they have several pictures of him. They must have hired him. I don't know. He's always.
He's popular in Keene.
Yeah.
And Mountain
Yeah.
View.
Yes. That's where he was. So these are pretty famous. One on the left, you've all probably seen them. Those are hand colored. Look at the fire and pit there. It's kind of bright. And the tents, but these are, I think, Stoddard. Timberlake. I'm not sure. I know the name of that hotel, and just like that guy's name, I can't remember. It's a senior moment. It was a big hotel in the Adirondacks, so I can't remember the name. There's a guy with his bear as a pet. On a rope. That could have been hand colored by Wooley or Stoddard. It's a little bit sloppy looking. And of course, the good night. And something we didn't really get into or show were their stereos. Their stereos were quite intriguing, and especially Wooley just shot every inch of Boston Spa in stereo. There's stacks of it. It's like, I don't know why. I guess he could. So he did. Every street and every house. Milton Avenue. That's kind of cool. But he shot everyday life, just sporting events, at the high school, weddings at the lake. I mean, you name it. He had his camera ready. There were some shots of him in Plattsburgh with President Taft when they were celebrating. They had a parade up there, and he has shots of President Taft. I just put together a virtual tour. So unfortunately, the timing is so out of whack because I think it's coming down next week.
Sunday's the last day.
Yeah, the last day. So there'll be a virtual tour that's coming. So you get to see it. Yeah, it's a little late. Yeah, it was. I got all out of sync. I had too many things going on. I was trying to do too much at once, of course, and but I've got the voiceover finished and I'm putting that together. So the next probably week I'll post this and I'll send the link out and you guys can put it on your website or whatever. And it kind of goes into more background depth of the exhibition. So I was just trying to give more information.
Well, there's plenty more in the warehouse for you to do another exhibit as well. Right?
Oh yeah.
Now I understand.
Oh yeah. What's that?
Isn't there plenty more in the warehouse?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's about what's in there is maybe half plus what's at home.
Round two.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, we could.
3, 4.
But that's what we were talking to Nicole about, coming back in some form and recreating it. But yeah,
You connected with Brookside Museum.
Oh, yeah, no, very well. Yeah,
last place.
yeah, no, very well. I spent, it's around 2011. I should tell you kind of, I'm not sure, what time is it? Yeah, so anyway, yeah, the backstory is I was up at the lake in the summer, and my buddy called me, he goes, oh man, you gotta come over here. So I went over to the Black Bass antique store, and they had a big stack of these negatives, and so I had my darkroom still set up, and I said, well, they go, we don't know what these are, and nobody knows what to do with them. And like, give me a few, I'll take them home. I proofed them and brought them back. So the gentleman, that his family passed away, and he inherited, he was just gonna throw them away anyway, because natives don't mean much. And I said, no, please don't. He said, well, go ahead and take them. He goes, it's not my thing. Just, put my name on the book or something. Okay. And so, yeah, so we started on this journey of trying to figure out what these were and how to get them printed, and it led us to Brookside. And one of the guys who led us to Brookside was Robert Baldwin. His book, because he wrote about it. So I tracked him down. He's in Vermont. He's retired. He taught at Syracuse University Press, or university. And so he said, you got to go to Boston Spa. So I spent in about 2011, I spent, geez, a few months on and off there, just going through and tons of archives and going through all their collection. They go, oh, dude. So yeah, so they were really good and really super nice to us, and let us in and go through all their collection. And so that helped us define some of this, because we couldn't get the time frame and materials, and being there really helped. And so then we went out, and once we kind of cataloged, after 2 or 3 years of cataloged everything, now what? And I said, I think it's a worthy book, really. Yeah, whatever. Okay, who's going to publish this? I don't know. So it was Robert Bogdan who I showed it to, and he was like, wow, I've never seen these. These are great, And he already published a dozen books through Syracuse University Press. So he introduced this one out, and they thought it would fit in the catalog really well. So they said, okay, so what's the title and what's it going to be about? I don't know. So we kept on these little baby steps, and it took us 10 years to get the publishing. And from 11 we started in 10 or 11, and it was published, I think, in 19, something like that. And it was just one after another thing. We kept pushing, it was like a snowball. Kept starting to take on this life of its own, because the more people that got involved, the more it would move. And every once in a while it'd stall, especially with editing and all. So like, 6 months would go by and we're still doing editing. And it's like, are we ever gonna get done? And it was just, when people say, oh, when I retire, I'm gonna write a book. Good luck. It'll probably be a thing to tell you, because it is just not it. I mean, I'm not a writer. I did some outlining of the book and kind of sketched out chapters, but man, it is painful. I gotta tell you, it was not like something fun that I would say, oh, hey, let's do this again. But it was, in the end, very rewarding. Just the people you meet along the way, like you guys, and the doors that it's open. So it's been a whole different world that I knew nothing about 10 years ago. But it's been really a pleasure and an honor to be part of, to be able to bring stuff forward to show and talk about and join with everybody else. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Do you have any questions?